Western Kenya could be witnessing the early stages of a significant political realignment. For years, the region's politics have revolved around established names from Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula to Wycliffe Oparanya and other influential figures. But a new political conversation is emerging. At the center of it is Nairobi Senator Sifuna, whose Linda Mwananchi movement has gained considerable attention during its recent mobilization across Western Kenya. And now, one of the region's prominent political figures, Cleophas Malala, has publicly thrown his weight behind Sifuna for leading a position in the opposition's 2027 equation. Malala has argued that Western Kenya must secure a meaningful place in the next political arrangement. So, is this simply another political endorsement, or are we witnessing the birth of a new formula for Western Kenya politics? For Sifuna, the political journey has taken an unexpected turn. The Nairobi senator has moved from being one of ODM's most recognizable voices to leading the Linda Mwananchi political movement. His political activities have increasingly taken him outside Nairobi and into different parts of the country. But it was his recent homecoming tour in Western Kenya that attracted particular attention. In July, Sifuna and the Linda Mwananchi team toured parts of Bungoma and Trans Nzoia, drawing large crowds and endorsements from local political leaders. The political message coming from the rallies was increasingly clear. Western Kenya wants a greater say in the national political equation, and Sifuna appears to be positioning himself as one of the people who could provide that leadership. Then came Cleophas Malala. On July 5, Malala proposed Sifuna for the deputy president position in a potential united opposition arrangement. His argument was straightforward. Western Kenya should not simply provide votes. It should negotiate for a meaningful position at the center of government. Malala said the Luya committee was not necessarily demanding the presidency but wanted consideration for the country's second highest office. 2 days later, Malala went even further. He warned that he could not support a united opposition ticket that failed to give Sifuna a significant position. That's an ordinary endorsement. It is a political statement about negotiating power. And it raises a bigger question. Will Sifuna become the vehicle through which a new generation of Western Kenyan politicians negotiates with the rest of the country? Why Sifuna? Part of the answer lies in his political profile. He is relatively young compared with many of the established figures dominating Kenya's presidential conversation. He is a strong communicator. He has a significant presence among young Kenyans. And his political message has increasingly centered on accountability, constitutionalism, and opposition to the current administration. But there is another fact. Sifuna is not trying to present himself simply as a lawyer politician. His Linda Mwananchi movement has been attempting to establish a national footprint. That distinction could be crucial because Western Kenya has faced the same political dilemma for decades. It has numbers but has struggled to convert those numbers into national executive power. Western Kenya is one of Kenya's most politically significant regions, but its political history is also one of fragmentation. Different leaders have controlled different parts of the region and different communities have supported different national coalitions. And the presidential candidates have often approached Western Kenya as a region to negotiate with rather than a region that produces the presidential contender. That's where the emerging Sifuna conversation becomes interesting. Could the region be saying this time we don't just want to support someone else's presidency, we want to shape the presidency itself? That's the bigger political question. For decades, Western Kenya politics have been associated with established political heavyweights Musalia Mudavadi, Moses Wetangula, Wycliffe Oparanya, and before them, leaders such as Kijana Wamalwa and Masinde Muliro. Today, Mudavadi and Wetangula are firmly positioned within President William Ruto's Kenya Kwanza administration. That creates an interesting political contrast. On one side are leaders who have chosen cooperation with the government, and on the other is a young political movement positioning itself firmly in opposition. And that's where Sifuna enters the picture. His recent Western Kenya tour was widely interpreted as an attempt to establish a new political center of gravity in the region. But Malala himself is an interesting character in this equation. He has moved across Kenya's political landscape previously, serving as Kakamega senator and later becoming a prominent figure within the United Democratic Alliance before joining Gachagua's Democracy for the Citizens Party. Gachagua unveiled the DCP in July and appointed Malala as its interim deputy party leader. That means Malala's endorsement of Sifuna cannot simply be viewed in isolation. It also raises questions about the wide opposition negotiations. If Malala is part of Gachagua's political formation while simultaneously advocating for Sifuna in the opposition equation, what does that tell us about the fluid fluidity of Kenya's 2027 politics? Perhaps the answer is simple. Nothing is settled yet. The emerging political landscape is becoming increasingly complicated. Gachagua has his own political vehicle, Sifuna has Linda Mwananchi, and the united opposition has several presidential hopefuls. And Western Kenya has leaders with different political interests. So where does this leave Sifuna? It could leave him with a powerful bargaining position. If he can demonstrate that he has a significant following beyond Nairobi, particularly in Western Kenya, it becomes harder for opposition leaders to ignore. And that is exactly what this recent mobilization appears designed to achieve. There is, however, an important distinction. A large political rally does not automatically translate into votes. Sifuna's Western tour generated excitement and significant public attention, but presidential politics requires much more than enthusiastic crowds. It requires structures, it requires party agents, and it requires resources. It also requires county-level organization, and most importantly, it requires support beyond one region. That's why Sifuna has repeatedly insisted that the Linda Mwananchi movement must establish a national presence before making final decisions about the 2027 presidential ticket. And this is where Sifuna's biggest challenge begins. Can he transform Western Kenya's enthusiasm into a national movement? Can he attract voters in central Kenya? Can he penetrate the Rift Valley? Can he establish a strong presence in Nyanza, Eastern and the coast? And perhaps most, can he convince Kenyans that his campaign is about more than just regional representation? Because a presidential candidate cannot simply say, I come from Western Kenya. The message must become, I can lead Kenya. Then there is the opposition's biggest problem. Who should lead? The opposition has several prominent figures. There is Gachagua, Kalonzo Musyoka, Fred Matiang'i, and now Sifuna. Each brings a different political base. Each has supporters who believe their candidate can defeat William Ruto. But putting all these politicians under one ticket will not be easy. Already, political analysts have identified the opposition's inability to agree on one presidential candidate as one of its biggest weaknesses. And Malala's position adds another layer. If Western Kenya demands that Sifuna be reconsidered for one of the top positions, the other coalition principals must decide. Do they accommodate, negotiate with him, or risk losing his support? For Western Kenya, the issue is ultimately about political bargaining power. The region has significant voting numbers, but numbers only matter when they are organized. This is the lesson Kenyan politics has repeatedly demonstrated. A region can have millions of voters and still struggle to determine who occupies the most powerful offices. The Sifuna-Malala conversation appears to be attempting to change that calculation. Instead of waiting for presidential candidates to come looking for Western Kenyan votes, the argument is Western Kenya should first define what it wants and then negotiate with presidential contenders from a position of strength. So, could Sifuna and Malala be laying the foundation for a new Western Kenya political formula? Possibly, but it is too early to declare a political revolution. What we are seeing is an emerging alignment, and Sifuna provides the youthful, national-facing political profile. Malala provides another influential voice from the region. Governor George Natembeya and other Western leaders have also been associated with the Linda Mwananchi mobilization, and other leaders are watching closely. This could eventually develop into a formidable regional coalition, or it could become another chapter in Western Kenya's long history of political competition. And watching all this closely is President William Ruto. The president's political coalition has traditionally enjoyed significant support in parts of Western Kenya, but the emergence of Sifuna's movement creates a new challenge. It gives opposition politics a fresh voice in the region where Kenya Kwanza has sought to consolidate its influence. That's why Sifuna's rise is no longer simply an ODM story. It is no longer simply a Nairobi story, and it is certainly no longer just a Western Kenya story. It is becoming a national political story. The old generation of political kingpins is still influential, but a young generation is demanding space. So Edwin Sifuna is at the center of that conversation. Claude Malala has publicly backed him for a opposition position, and leaders allied to Linda Mwananchi have already been pushing his presidential ambitions in Western Kenya, but the real test is still ahead. Can Sifuna convert political excitement into a national organization? Can Western Kenya unite behind one political formula? And can the opposition agree on a candidate capable of taking that formula beyond the region? For now, one thing is clear. Western Kenya is no longer quietly waiting for the 2027 political deal to be announced. The region is increasingly demanding a seat at the table, and perhaps this time it wants to help decide who sits at the head of it. The question is no longer simply who will get Western Kenya votes. The question is, who will Western Kenya choose to negotiate with, and what will it demand in return? This is the political battle to watch as Kenya moves closer to 2027. I am Winston Ondari for National Alert TV.